Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Culbertson, economist with the Indeed Hiring Lab, and it is time for another U.S. labor market update. As always, there's a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and get right to it. As they always do at the beginning of the month, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics released their Employment Situation Report, otherwise known as the Jobs Report. And inside of this report, we get a lot of great data about the labor market covering up to the previous month. So for September, there was some good news in the report, but there are also some aspects of it that were a bit concerning. Perhaps the biggest piece of news was that in September, the U.S. economy added 661,000 jobs. Driving this employment growth was hiring inside of leisure and hospitality, retail, and healthcare, while job losses inside of state and local government, mainly pertaining to education, were a bit of a drag on growth. A 1 month jobs gain of 661,000 is an incredibly large number, but still, in this particular moment in time, there are some aspects of this number that are a bit concerning, mainly that this marks the third consecutive month that job growth inside the United States has slowed. And you can see this in this chart here, which is showing total payrolls inside the United States. Far on the right side of this chart, you can see the uptick that we have experienced in the labor market since the start of the recovery from COVID-19. And at the very right side of this chart, over the past couple months, you can see job growth beginning to taper off. This in and of itself is rather concerning, but especially when you consider that we are still 10.7 million jobs shy of where we were before all this started in February of 2020. This is very worrisome. You typically don't want to see job growth slow down this early in the recovery. So this is certainly something that we hope to see pick up in the near future. Another big piece of news from this report has to do with the unemployment rate. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics measures the unemployment rate in several different ways, but the one that is talked about most, otherwise known as the headline unemployment rate, declined again in September to 7.9%. This marks the fifth consecutive month that the unemployment rate has declined. But there is also something worrisome in the unemployment rate data as well. On this chart here, which is showing the headline unemployment rate with the blue line, and this chart is also showing the core unemployment rate with the orange line. And the core unemployment rate is essentially the headline unemployment rate, but it is factoring out all temporary workers. So it gives us a better look at sustained unemployment. And as you can see on this chart, the core unemployment rate in the month of September rose to 6.1%, and this is the highest it's been since the start of this crisis. Economists will be keeping a close eye on the core unemployment rate because at the start of this crisis, many people who were falling into unemployment considered themselves to be temporarily unemployed, meaning that they felt they had a job to go back to once the economy began to reopen. But with the core unemployment rate rising, what this means is that more and more people are falling into what we consider permanent unemployment, or at least permanently becoming detached from their previous job. And this is something that is obviously very concerning for the long-term health of the labor market. And again, the core unemployment rate is something that economists will be watching very closely as we continue through this recovery. Lastly, I'd like to cover a trend that we have been watching very closely in Indeed's own data, and that is the overall trend in job postings on our site, which is a real-time measure of labor market activity. On this chart here, we are showing the overall trend in job postings on our site over the past couple years. And for each trend line on this graph, every year is indexed to February 1st, and we do that just so all these trend lines start at the same point and we can get a sense of how these trend lines differ as we move through the year. With the yellow line on this chart, you can see just how different 2020 has been. In mid-March, once COVID-19 becomes a problem, we begin to see job postings on our site fall rather drastically. They continued to fall until about May, and since then we have seen more or less steady but rather slow improvement in the total count of job postings on our site. As of October 2nd, we are now only 16% behind last year's trend. So it's great news that we're getting so close to last year's trend, and it's especially great news that job postings have continued to tick up heading into October, considering, as you can see on the chart here in August and September, job postings began to level off for a bit. So in summary, there was some good news inside of the jobs report for the month of September. However, there were some concerning aspects that economists will be keeping an eye on as we move through this recovery. And in Indeed's own job posting data, we are continuing to see employers get back into the labor market looking to hire new workers, which overall obviously is a great sign for the labor market. Until next time, take care and thank you for tuning in.